Hello and welcome to today's presentation on the Sensory Profile 2. My name is Claire Howells. I'm the new OT consultant within Australia and New Zealand, and here to present an overview of the Sensory Profile 2. You may have seen recently that a lot of our webinars on pearsonclinical.com.au aren't currently working. We are going through a bit of a transition period, so you can find all of our available webinars on YouTube if you search Pearson Clinical Australia. During this presentation, we will be speaking broadly about what is the Sensory Profile 2. We will speak about the key benefits, standardisation, reliability and validity, what's new between the Sensory Profile and the new edition, the Sensory Profile 2, administration methods, theoretical concepts, scoring, and also speak about a case study available from the manual. What is the Sensory Profile 2? Sensory Profile 2 is a revision of the original Sensory Profile family of assessments. It is a standardized method of documenting children's sensory processing patterns. It helps to identify the effect of sensory processing on functional participation in different environmental contexts of home, school, and community. It's an evidence-based method of confirming sensory hypotheses that may be supporting or creating challenges to participation in daily activities. It's a set of judgment-based caregiver and teacher questionnaires to support a child's responses based on various sensory stimuli, and it provides evidence of patterns of response, indicating a child's sensory processing patterns. What are the key benefits of the Sensory Profile 2? There's a number of benefits that have been outlined within the manual, but I think the most important would be the simplicity of use, as in it can be administered and scored using paper or web-based formats. It's contextually relevant, i.e. it captures sensory processing patterns across different environmental contexts. It's evidence and theory based. It was built on a wealth of evidence from first editions and provides a structure for theory-based decision making. And lastly, and probably the most importantly, it is strength-based and inclusive. It was designed for use with all children, regardless of other conditions, because it characterises their response to sensory experiences within daily life. Standardisation of the Sensory Profile 2 took place between 2012 and 2013. There were 1,791 children in the normative sample and 774 children in the clinical sample, including diagnoses of ASD, ADHD, learning disabilities, and other disabilities. Retest reliability of the SP2, which is consistency of a measure from one time to another, of the parent forms was 0.83 to 0.97, and for the teacher forms was 0.66 to 0.93. The inter-rater reliability, which is the degree to which different raters give consistent estimates of the same phenomenon, were between 0.49 and 0.90, but mostly below 0.7, so quite good. And internal consistency, which is the measure of how well a test addresses different constructs and delivers reliable scores, has a range between 0.63 and 0.93. As an overview of the assessment, the age range is between birth to 14 years, 11 months. The two administration options are paper-based or online via Pearson's Q Global platform. The rater forms are completed by a caregiver, parent, and/or teacher, and the scoring options are either manual or online via the same Q Global platform, which we will speak about shortly. There are 5 different rater questionnaires depending on the client that you are seeing. So we have the infant sensory profile, which is for years between birth and 6 months. There is the toddler sensory profile between 7 months and 35 months, the child sensory profile between 3 to 14 years, the short sensory profile between 3 to 14 years, and the school companion sensory profile between 3 to 14 years. And you can see here below the infant, toddler, child, and the short. all come with the Spanish version available also. So another benefit of the new edition of the sensory profile is you have some new administration options. So you have the paper-based forms, and you have the 3 options within that. So you have rater forms, which you can send to caregiver or teacher to complete and return to you. You can ask the rater to complete the form while you're evaluating the child, or you can help the rater fill out the questionnaire if they have difficulty reading due to being non-English speaking background or have a reading disability. And then you have the using a digital form. So you have Q Global, which is the Pearson owned digital platform, and that provides that remote on-screen administration option whereby you can send an email link to your rater to complete the questionnaire during their own time. You have the option of on-screen administration whereby you complete it while the rater completes it while you're evaluating the child, or assisted on-screen administration if, I mentioned previously, they have difficulty reading or have a form of disability. Now I'm going to summarize the purchase options that you have available for the sensory profile 2. So it's important to note that pearsonclinical.com.au is where you conduct all of your purchases. If it is a digital purchase, you will then receive a Q Global email to set up your account. And then if it is a paper-based form, you'll obviously have that delivered to your home. So the summary report, the first option on the screen, is that $3 per usage, and that includes the administration, online or remote on screen, the scoring and the reporting. With this, it's important that you don't need to select a specific form. I get a lot of confusion with that. You'll just need to purchase as many as you need, and then on Q Global you'll be able to select the appropriate form, such as the infant, toddler, child, etc. The second option is that unlimited use scoring of a 1-year subscription. So that's great for the therapist that still likes to use the paper-based forms but would like to save time with the scoring part of it, and that provides you with the scoring and the summary report as well, and is an unlimited use. The third option is for the therapist that prefers to keep everything paper-based, and this is just one of our paper-based options, the starter kit, and that includes the manual and all of the forms as well. So if you don't have to purchase the starter kit, if you're wanting to just say purchase the infant forms, you could do that, vice versa for toddler, etc. So another thing to note is the manual. You can purchase that in the digital format or also in the paper format as well. The digital format will be available on your Q Global, and obviously the paper-based will be then sent to your address. So what's new between the sensory profile and the sensory profile 2? So within the new profile, it has been updated and carefully reviewed in its content. All forms have been included in one kit and one manual, and paper questionnaires include the scoring sheet. There has been changes to the items within each of the questionnaires to make the administration time shorter. So the infant questionnaire has gone from 36 to 25. The child questionnaire has gone from 125 to 86. The school from 62 to 44 items, and the short from 38 to 34. There's also been an increased age range to 14 years 11 months. You'll see there is a bit of an overlap between that and the adolescent sensory profile. So it enables you to make the decision as to whether you'd like to present it in a self-report format in the adolescent, or if the child is more appropriate to have a caregiver answer the questions for them. Also, you have the option of both paper and online administration and scoring. You also have the option of multi-rater comparisons on the Q Global platform, where you can compare the responses across multiple caregivers and environments. It has had detailed validity and reliability studies carried out and have been undertaken with gold standard measures, which you can see a lot more clearly within the manual. Percentile ranks have also been included for an additional level of analysis. This was included based on a lot of feedback from the therapists, and we have some updated rating scales as well. So you'll see that almost always is equated to 5 points instead of previously 1. Here you can see an example of the movement processing section of the questionnaire. So you can see the questions that are directly related to each quadrant. So pursues movement to the point it interferes with daily routines, directly related to that seeking quadrant. And you also have the score key, which is on the right here, which allows the rater to be able to determine the most suitable response. Here's a closer look at the scoring key present in the previous slide. You can see that almost always is present 90% or more of the time. Frequently it's around 75% of the time. Half the time is 50%. Occasionally is 25%, and almost never is 10% or less. We also have the option of does not apply. So it's important to note that this does impact your overall result. And so if you find that your rater is selecting does not apply, it's really important that you go and have a conversation with them to see whether they are having difficulty understanding the question, or whether they have selected that due to having not observed the behavior. Or if, in an instance they've selected this, they have noted their child does not complete that behavior, but it's for a specific reason, such as they're trying to avoid participating in that activity. Here are some tangible examples of items that have been either reworded or just not used between the previous sensory profile and the updated version. You can see here child is active throughout the day has been reworded to be needs the same routine to stay content and calm. Behavior deteriorates when the schedule changes has been reworded to acts in a way that interferes with family schedules and plans, and has difficulty getting to sleep and easily awakened. It has been reworded to requires help to get to sleep. So I think that the new word really relates it back to function and makes it a little bit easier to understand for raters. I'll give you a minute or so just to have a read through the rest of them. This is an example of the scoring section on the front of the form. You can see here where the raw score totals are allocated, and then you have percentile ranks as we spoke about previously. Down the bottom here you can see for percentile ranges, see Appendix A in the user manual, so that will give you that percentile range there, and also allow you to allocate the score based on less than others to more than others, which gives you a better visual understanding of where that child sits. So as I'm sure you know, the Sensory Profile 2 is based on Winnie Dunn's sensory processing framework, which focuses on activity demands, context and environment, and how this supports or interferes with participation. They're broken down into 4 different areas, quadrants. So you have seeking, which represents high neurological threshold with active self-regulation strategies. They're called seekers, and this is the degree to which a child obtains sensory input. You have avoiding, which represents the low neurological threshold with active self-regulating strategies, called avoiders, and that's the degree to which a child is bothered by sensory input. You have sensitivity, which represents low neurological threshold with passive self-regulating strategies. They're called sensors, and that is the degree to which a child detects sensory input. And then you have registration, which represents high neurological thresholds with passive self-regulating strategies called bystanders, and that's the degree to which a child misses sensory input. You can see within the diagram there, you have the two different continuums. You have the self-regulation continuum, which is on that horizontal axis, and then you have the neurological threshold continuum on that vertical axis, and that gives you a pretty good representation, visual representation of where each of those quadrants sit within the overarching continuum of Winnie Dunn's framework. So I'll elaborate a little bit more on each of those quadrants. So as I said, the sensory seeking or sensation seeking is a high threshold with active response. So they'll typically enjoy sensory rich environments. They create sensory experiences such as making noises or fidgeting. They can be easily bored and have difficulty in low stimulus environments. However, as Winnie Dunn likes to frame things in a more strengths-based approach, you'll find that the strengths of sensory seeking or seekers is they'll have a bigger interest in exploring their environments and may find joy in sharing sensory experiences with others. Sensory avoiding will have that low threshold and active avoiding strategies. They will typically intentionally withdraw from sensation and be overwhelmed with sensory rich environments. However, their strengths will be more so around in creating that structure and supportive environments that help them to not have these uncomfortable experiences. Sensory sensitive, all your senses will have that low threshold with passive response. They will typically easily respond to sensory stimuli. They will notice things that others miss. They'll be highly aware of their surroundings and can become distractible or hyperactive. However, the strengths of theirs will be that high level of awareness to their surroundings and ability to discriminate detail. Our bystanders or our low registration have high threshold with a passive response. They'll often miss sensory input or cues. They might be under responsive or slow to respond. They can typically focus in sensory rich environments and have the strengths of being more flexible and able to function in a wide variety of environments. Over the last 2 decades, the understanding of sensory processing patterns has evolved away from terms such as low and poor with reference to registration. This change has aligned with the theoretical concept of a continuum of detection, where some people detect a lot and others miss a lot of stimuli. This is also aligned more with the strengths-based approach of identifying sensory processing patterns. From a strengths-based perspective, knowing a person's pattern creates a tool to gain insight into which environments and activities are likely to be easier or more challenging, and provides possibilities for interventions which use a person's processing patterns to their advantage, rather than seeing them as a dysfunction. So you can see here that the scores will sit within the bell curve. You have, just like the majority of others, being that the mean, and the other scores will sit somewhere along that bell curve. So much less than others, sorry, will sit outside 2 standard deviations below the mean. Less than others will be within 2 standard deviations of the mean, below the mean. Just like majority of others will be within that 1 standard deviation above or below the mean, and more than others is within 2 standard deviations above the mean. Much more than others is outside 2 standard deviations above the mean. So here's an example of a test that I completed on Q Global and is what you'll see in your report. On the left, you'll see that test responds to sounds just like the majority of others within that auditory processing, and that's then plotted on the bell curve. You can see that just like the auditory processing, visual processing is also within that just like the majority of others, but then you can see down a little bit further that touch processing, body position processing, and oral sensory have been plotted in that much more than others category. So it allows you to see where your client sits in a bit more of a visual format. And then towards the right of the screen, you'll see that the quadrants are then scored for you, so you can see how your client sits in relation to those 4 quadrants, and then also you get the classification and the percentile ranges there for you too. So what are some appropriate uses for the sensory profile too? So they are contributing to determining eligibility for services, providing information for intervention planning, providing a vehicle for discussion with family or within the school, and to be combined with other data such as parents or siblings to see how they compare. What it isn't designed for is to document progress. So I'm going to take you through one of the case studies from the manual today. It's a bit easier sometimes to have a bit of a discussion rather than just read it. So we're going to be talking about Jared, who is a 1-year-old boy who was referred to OT to support family with his bedtime routines. He has a diagnosis of developmental delay from his pediatrician and was currently receiving physiotherapy, who recommended OT input to support his family with meals and bedtime, as it was noted that he was not eating much like his peers. So the process of assessment was OT spoke to Jared's mother, observed him during lunchtime meal while he was playing with his mum and during that afternoon nap routine. And from that observation and discussions was able to create a hypothesis that determined suitability for the sensory profile 2, and therefore she sent that to be completed by his mother. So that hypothesis was that Jared becomes distracted by stimuli such as the television and his iPad, which makes it challenging to hold his attention and to create a meal and a nap routine. So you can see here his scores from the sensory profile. He has scored more than others for sensitivity, which indicates he has a low threshold for certain stimuli, and particularly within auditory and perhaps visual processing as well. You can see as well that he's scored much more than others for registration, which indicates he's also missing cues more than his peers. This might appear to be contradicting, as one score reflects lack of noticing and the other reflects more frequently noticing. However, it is consistent with observation from his OT and his parents as well. So for example, his parents reported that any noise would wake him up at night and disturb his sleep, which corresponds with that sensitive quadrant. And then they also have difficulty getting his attention when calling his name, due to being frequently distracted by the TV or the radio, which corresponds well with that bystander quadrant. So it was really important for the OT to gather all of these examples to be able to explain what these results meant with Jared's life. And I'm sure as OTs yourself or behaviour therapists, you'll find that sometimes the scores appear to contradict themselves, but it's looking for those examples where you can really explain how they're present in daily function, that you can understand the scores themselves. So just to summarize all of that, so the referral was to to receive assistance and support with meal and bedtime routines. The first intervention really focused on that mealtime routine. The current barriers that were noted was that Jared was seated facing the television, and considering this was both a visual and auditory distraction, it was hypothesized that this was likely to be a main barrier during his meals at home. So the OT worked closely with his parents on a couple of interventions, those of which was to have Jared face away from the TV during his meal times. OT also suggested turning it off altogether. However, the mother preferred to have it on, as this helped maintain his sister's attention, and so the mother could focus on Jared and supporting him during those meal periods. The OT also suggested adding visual cues such as coloured placemats during meal times, which would assist to bring his attention to the food. And another great addition was a parent's suggestion that it would be time to introduce grown-up foods, which would make him feel a bit more included in the family routine as well. So the family began providing appropriate foods to him and cutting them up on their plate to really show the link between the family. So the second intervention was focused around that bedtime routine. The current barriers that were noted were the noises frequently throughout the house at night time, such as the footsteps and the television, which tended to wake him up constantly and really disrupt that sleep routine. The interventions were just overall reduction in noise from the rest of the house, such as turning the television down and just being conscious of walking near to his room. Also educating the family around the difference between alerting sounds such as footsteps and the television, and the calming sounds such as familiar music or white noise. So from this, the family decided to start playing music during sleep time, which would offer consistent auditory input and reduce the chances of waking up to alerting sounds. So what was the outcome of these interventions? So the mealtime was, after changing the position of Jared's chair, his mother reported he was less distractible during meal times, which allowed him to finish his meals in an acceptable time frame. And these strategies also allowed the family to dine out more often as well, which is a really great outcome. So the introduction of the placemat and eating the same foods as his family was also successful, as it allowed him to focus his attention on his plate rather than comparing to his siblings. So really good outcome for that. And then around bedtime, the intervention started with an album of lullabies, which were initially played after placing him in his crib. However, family found that once the music had stopped, after a period, Jared would continue to wake up overnight. So with some alternative suggestions, the family followed up by concentrating a lot more on lowering noise from the house, and also by installing a fan into his room, which was able to provide that consistent white noise, which has now been successful in reducing the frequency of his waking up. Thank you for coming to today's webinar on an overview of the Sensory Profile 2. This is a preliminary training or an overview of Sensory Profile 2. Everything that I've covered within this is present in the manual, and I really encourage that if you have questions during that interpretation of results and are looking for some more case studies, the manual is a really great tool for all of that information. Another option that is upcoming, if you're looking for a bit more of a comprehensive training, is an online self-directed sensory profile training, which will be available in Australia in the second half of 2022. I will be keeping everyone updated with this, as we don't have an exact date at this moment, but the training will cover an introduction to sensory processing, done sensory processing framework, an interactive overview of the sensory profile, some more specific and detailed administration and scoring, interpretation, the implications for clinical practice, and then some really thorough case studies which were presented by Winnie Dunn and Tina Brown, which are more of those high-level complex case studies, which are really useful. If you are interested in attending or would like some more information for that training, please feel free to send me an email on the email on the screen, and I can add you to the email list for further information when it's available.